story of Texas is not one that can easily be told through just words and pictures. The Texas mystique was carved out of the rugged landscape by Native Americans, the Spanish, and Anglo settlers armed with tools and a vision for a new home. By the time the Declaration bell rang in 1836, Texas already had 300 years of history under Spanish rule. It is here at Washington-on-the-Brazos where the modern story of Texas begins. We'll meet the people who keep this story alive today at the State Historic Park in Washington County. This is our Texas. On the 80th anniversary of Texas's Declaration of Independence, a committee of state officials purchased the land where the document was signed. The land was designated a state park, and its historic past was cultivated to teach future generations about the riverside city where Texas became Texas. Nearly 100 years later, the park is home to Barrington Living History Farm, the Star of the Republic Museum, and a replica version of Independence Hall. The building was constructed in the 1970s on the exact site of the original hall. Here to tell us more is Texas Parks and Wildlife Ranger Adam Arnold.
Well, the basic footprint is based off of archaeological findings in the late 1960s. The structure itself is really the product of basic architectural style from the time and the few surviving descriptions that we have of the old hall. We have it made out of white oak, as the old hall was made out of, and we have it set up as we believe it would have been for the convention. At that time, the building was still under construction, and simply to furnish it, tables and chairs had to be borrowed from neighboring homes and communities.
A committee of elected officials, interpreters, assistants, and clerks worked through near-freezing temperatures to write the Declaration. On March 2, 1836, the document was ratified and signed by 59 delegates. The Republic of Texas was born. 4 days later, nearly 200 Texas fighters were overcome by the Mexican army in the famous Battle of the Alamo. The defeat bolstered General Sam Houston's forces, leading to a crushing victory over the Mexican army on April 21, 1836, at the Battle of San Jacinto. The Republic survived, and 4 presidents led Texas before the Lone Star State was annexed into the Union on December 29, 1845. The home of Dr. Anson Jones, the Republic's last president, was moved to the Barrington Living History Farm in 1936 during Texas Independence Centennial celebrations. It now rests in its original form with an acre of cropland and several period replica buildings surrounding it. The working farm features livestock and produces corn and cotton during the regular planting seasons. Bruce J. Wardlow is a historic interpreter who works on the agriculture side of the farm. He gives tours of the home and ranch, explaining to visitors what life in the 1840s would have been like for Dr. Jones and his family.
I'm not sure if you saw when you walked in, the first thing we usually comment on is the fact that there's a big hole in the house, you know, and it's a traditional dog run style house, and it's got this big old hole because in Texas in summer it's hot, and if you have a big hole in the middle of your house, it'll act as a wind tunnel and draw the breeze through there, amplifying it. And so you would, spend a lot of your life out here in the dog truck. This is the master bedroom. It's a not necessarily terribly exciting place. It's a reproduction of an actual portrait of Anson Jones, the 4th and last president of Texas. But here in this room would have been Dr. Jones and his youngest children.
The home features 6 rooms, 2 bedrooms on the first floor, as well as a sitting room and a dining room for entertaining guests. The upstairs, which is closed to visitors, features a common room and bedroom where the eldest children would have slept. In addition to farming, Dr. Jones had a medical practice. Some of the equipment he might have used is kept in the house to exhibit techniques of the time.
You see a lot of funky little tools like this. This one, you put it against your skin like so, and pull the trigger, and you get little blades that pop out. Listen, I don't just want to go to the doctor, and have that.
Behind the house is an open hearth kitchen and a smokehouse, where the interpreters cook meals. Each year, one of the pigs born on the farm is slaughtered. The meat is cured and cold smoked. The pork, seen hanging on the rack, is also served for meals eaten by the interpreters. Across the pasture is a storehouse for cotton and corn grown on the acre of cropland. There also is a barn for keeping tools, more storage, and a pen for a rooster and a turkey. Next to the barn are two styles of slave quarters that might have been built far from Dr. Jones's house. Here, Wardlow explains what their lives might have been like on a pre-Civil War plantation.
Yeah, your cabins at this time, they weren't really someplace you would go to relax. They're mostly a place to sleep. And so you don't have a lot of light in here. You don't have very much at all. Because the slaves especially would be working from sunrise to sunset 6 days out of the week. And then Dr. Jones would usually give them Sundays off to take care of their own business. Usually that meant they had their own garden, or they could do a little bit of hunting, or sit down and fix their clothes. So Dr. Jones, he was generally considered a benign slave owner. What that means is that he treated his slaves fairly well, because then they would be productive and less problematic.
The Barrington Living History Farm certainly gives a hands-on look at life in the time of the Republic of Texas. But for an expansive look at life pre- and post-independence, there's no better stop at the park than the Star of the Republic Museum. The two-story, star-shaped building features exhibits on the history of the world, the U.S., and most importantly, the Lone Star State. Here to explain some of the exhibits is Museum Director Houston McGaugh.
The Star of the Republic Museum is about to complete come up on our 44th anniversary. The museum opened in 1970 as part of Blinn College, actually part of their outreach program to the community. And our focus, our mission, is to interpret the Republic period of Texas history, roughly 1836 to 1846. And so all of our collections and programs and exhibits reflect roughly that period of time. When people first walk in the museum, we want them to see something bright and colorful with a lot of different things in there. And what it focuses on is the Texas mystique. Everybody knows there's something special about Texas. And so we tried to focus on those items with Sam Houston and Longhorns and oil well, but also point out the different cultures in Texas. So we highlight several items of different cultures. And then as people go through the museum and look at the exhibits, they'll see these items again in their proper context. So they kind of get a sense of what Texas is about.
The beginning of the tour takes visitors through life with the Native Americans, through the Spanish colonial period, highlights some of the wildlife and terrain, and into the arrival of Anglo settlers brought by Stephen F. Austin in the 1820s. A special exhibit on display this year highlights the African American influence on Texas's development as well.
The title of our exhibit is Enduring Spirit, African Americans in 19th century Texas. And we call it Enduring Spirit because it just seems like it never stopped. From the very first African Americans that came into Texas, actually in the 1820s, as free blacks, as they were referred to, set up homesteads, lived, farmed, cultivated crops, raised livestock. And then the Texas Revolution came along in 1836, and by 1840, there was a law that passed that said Texas is not going to accept free blacks. So they basically were given 2 years to either leave the Republic or go back to being a slave.
The second part of the tour follows Texas's road to independence, from the Battle of Anahuac on June 12, 1832, through the Declaration Convention and into the 9 years as a nation. Highlights include Mexican artisanry, the Texas Rangers, and the importance of newspapers for global communications.
And their only form of communications, either they stood face to face and had a conversation, or they wrote letters, but they loved their newspapers. And every little community had its own newspaper. It might have been printed on the back of something else, all various sizes, but everybody just lined up to get that weekly newspaper to find out what was going on, because they could run stories about Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, London. In fact, it's funny, we have examples of the London newspaper that was running stories about the Texas Revolution. So this was really a worldwide event, but the newspaper really brought the communities together.
Walking along the ramp to the second floor, visitors can follow a timeline from the early days of global exploration in the 15th century through the modern era. On the second floor is a detailed look at life in Texas leading into the 20th century. Cotton, trades, health, medicine, social life, and other areas are explored, with displays ranging from trinkets and clothing to a makeshift riverboat used to traverse the Brazos and other rivers in Texas. The collections grow as more artifacts are purchased or donations are made to the museum. Nearly every aspect as an early Texas settler, cowboy, or craftsman is covered on the second floor of the museum. But it's the aspect of independence that rings through. At Independence Hall, at Barrington Living History Farm, and the Star of the Republic Museum.
I think most people would admit, I should say most Texans would admit, that Texas is special. It's about the only state that came in as an independent country. And so Texans like to celebrate that. And I think what's really unique, if you stop to think about it, is Washington-on-the-Brazos is really the most historically significant site in Texas. It's certainly not the most famous, the Alamo is. And maybe the second most famous is San Jacinto, where Sam Houston defeated the Mexican army. And yet, what day do we celebrate Texas Independence Day? It's on March the 2nd, where delegates that were elected by the people of Texas came together in convention to declare their independence from the Mexican government, who basically had changed all the laws under which they came and settled in Mexico. So it's really an expression of democracy, of the people saying no more. And we do herefore declare independence from a government that did not meet the people's needs.